Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Michelle Kane and I am the director of the SDCEO Women's Business Center, a small business administration resource partner. We are here again today to answer your questions about the EIDL Advance, EIDL Loan, and the PPP program, which is part of the CARES Act. Today I have Marcella Hurley, Lender Relations Specialist with the SBA, and Lisa Clausen, Business Development Specialist with the SBA, live from our studio in Sioux Falls, right? At least live today. And here's really, if you have not attended one of these sessions before, we are really here to answer your questions specific to your business or organization. And you are welcome to put them in the Q&A, add your questions into the Q&A or into the chat box. Both Lisa and Marcella are going to give us an overview of both programs because things are changing. Guidance is changing. And we want to make sure that you are well prepared for your business. Just a quick overview of the Women's Business Center. We are here to empower women and propel economic development across South Dakota. What does that mean? We do trainings and webinars and conferences and do one-on-one free business advising. So if your business is needs some help in regards to COVID, maybe you need some pivoting, some marketing advice, some PR advice, different ways to price and market your products. You can set up an appointment with me. I'll put my contact information in there. It is free and confidential, and we're doing that over Zoom. Or perhaps this is maybe the time to launch a business. I can help. So we are here to help you, and we are delighted to be part of today's session. So I would like to turn it over to Marcella and Lisa. What is happening, ladies, in regards to EIDL and PPP?
Good morning, and thanks for letting us join you in your webinar. Let's start first with Lisa, our EIDL expert. She's been handling all the really gnarly questions, and she's got all the information and can handle questions later.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, and there was a change over the weekend, fairly big change with the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program. Those are direct funds through SBA. The advanced portion of the application did run out of funding. It came to the limit of $20 billion, and that was the cap. So there's no longer an advance option when an applicant applies for the EIDL loan. Also, I've been getting questions if an applicant is no longer interested in receiving the loan. Now you can receive the advance and not be interested in receiving the loan. So if you're not interested in receiving the loan, you can just not respond to the email that you receive, or respond back. It should go back to disaster customer service at sba.gov, and it will be withdrawn. Also, we do not have access to look at the applications or make a change. So anyone can call the disaster customer service line at 1-800-659-2955. There is, depending on the time of day you call, there can be quite a hold, but the initial customer service representative that you speak to may not be able to help you, and they may have to transfer you to Tier 2, which will be another period of hold time, but typically they can answer your questions and move along with your application request. I also have had some applicants who have made mistakes on their applications, so please be very careful when you're filling out your application and make sure everything lines up with your application, such as when you, like your business name on your bank account should be the same name as your business name on the application. Things of that nature. They're trying to avoid fraud and just make sure that everything is legit. The portal, the EIDL portal did go down on Friday afternoon, the sba.gov/disaster portal to make application. It did come back up over the weekend, so it is back up and to make application. It's a very easy application to complete. I think it's 4 or 5 pages, all done electronically. And after you make application, and after you click submit, please write down your application number. It's, I believe 10 digits long, because that is what you would have to refer to if you're checking on the status or have to make a change with the disaster customer service folks. Let's see, ownership. That's been another issue. Make sure your ownership when you're filling out the application totals 100%. That has been an issue with the applications coming in. So I think that's all I have right now with the EIDL program. If you have any questions, you can give me a call. And like I said, the website is sba.gov/disaster. We can find the link to make application. And one other thing, I've also had a question, if I make a mistake and I apply again, I would advise not to do that, because they will throw out your second application. So just call and get customer service to make the change, whatever that may be. So
Hey, Lisa.
Yes.
One question that we've had too is how to differentiate when emails are coming from disaster, if it's fraud or not, if it's legit. What advice would you give?
Yes, I've had those questions also. Make sure the ending of the email address ends in sba.gov, not sba.com or .org. It has to be from an email address that ends in sba.gov.
And really to look at that email address, because they're, people are being a little sneaky about that.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
Sometimes you can't tell, where an email is coming from. So if you're very careful, you can hit reply and see that full email address typically. So don't, hit send or anything, but just hit reply and you can see that entire email address that you're replying to.
And then you can discard it.
Yes, then you can delete it,
right,
or reply back, or just continue with the request from whatever SBA is asking of you from the email.
Thank you. And in case people have not applied for an EIDL loan, could you give just a short overview of the maximum amount, interest, and any other details around that?
Sure. The maximum is $150,000. At this time, applicants may have read that at one time the maximum was $2 million. About a month or two ago, the SBA had to reduce the maximum for fear of running out of funding under the program. So it went from $2 million to $150,000, and the interest rate is 3.75% or 2.75% for nonprofit, and the payment is deferred for 12 months. And also there is no prepayment penalty, and payments are over 30 years. So some of the payments can be pretty low, as you can imagine. We had one lady call, and I think her payment was $5 a month, and she was not interested in doing that. So she was looking into prepaying that, just so she could not have that payment of $5 every month. So
right. Thank you. And if you could just remind everyone, what is the EIDL loan for? What should that be used for businesses?
Sure. The loan request or the fund should be used for anywhere where a business has been affected by the virus, such as if you were unable to make payroll, if you were unable to pay a supplier, if you were unable to make some sort of a payment, a mortgage payment or a rent payment, lease payment, any fixed expense along those lines. It's not designed to pay off a loan and basically like refinance with a lower interest rate. Don't pay off a loan and with the amount. You can make a payment, of course, but it's not designed to refinance another loan.
Okay, and then thank you so much. And then as far as the backup that people should be keeping as far as what they're using the EIDL form, what would you, or the EIDL loan for, what would you recommend?
As far as documentation, I would suggest a lot of applicants are putting the funds into a separate account, and that way they have a nice record of where the funds have been spent or how the funds have been spent. So that's a good idea. If applicants or borrowers don't want to do that, they can make a spreadsheet. I had a lady who wanted to make a spreadsheet. She didn't want another account. And I understand that in some circumstances, of course. So another idea is to make a spreadsheet and just keep track of all the expenses or how you spend all the loan amounts, the loan proceeds. And we don't know how IRS is going to treat all this yet. So it's always good to have something in writing as to how you spent your loan proceeds.
Thank you. And it's documentation. It's going to be really clear until that guidance comes out.
Right.
We do have a question specific to the EIDL. In regards to nonprofits who are applying, they enter the entity EIN and info, and then they're asked for the owner info and a tax ID, and they're confused of how to fill this out since there's really no owner.
Right. Yeah. The application it won't change the format no matter if you're an ag type business or you're a nonprofit or you're for-profit. It's a one size try to fit all. So I would suggest for a nonprofit, and nonprofits that are eligible to make application are the 501c3s and the 501c19s. So I would suggest that putting maybe the president of the board or some contact point in the application, so there is some contact and someone who can answer questions in case the disaster SBA team reaches out to you.
So it's really more the contact.
Yeah, a couple things to remember with an EIDL loan. One is that the business is always the borrower. So the borrower is always the business, whether you're a sole prop or not, or a nonprofit or a for-profit. So that, just remembering that may help you when you need to fill out the owner information as well.
And as far as the social security number, I'm not sure, in our old systems, we used to be able to put all 9s. I'm not sure if that still works with this application format.
I tried it with a borrower and it didn't take
Okay.
it.
So whoever the president of the board or someone who is in control of that nonprofit, they need to put their information in the application and their contact information.
And that's one of the things too, when like what you're saying, Lisa, is the form is trying to kind of be all things to all different types of organizations, which can be a little confusing.
Yeah, so keep that in mind. Just remember, fill it out as the best and accurate as you can. And, you know, just because you click that you're a nonprofit initially on that first page doesn't mean that the questions will format to your specific business.
That's a good reminder. So thank you. And just a reminder for those that are on, if you do have specific questions about EIDL, to go ahead and put those into the chat or the Q&A. We do have a question about the PP3, which we'll get to with Marcel in a moment. And just maybe just to reiterate, do you have advice on how to track expenses if businesses receive both the EIDL and the PPP loans? What recommendations would you give to business owners? Thank you.
I would keep a separate spreadsheet. An Excel spreadsheet works great if you're familiar with that. If not, a Word document. Put the date, where you spent the funds, the amount, of course, who it was payable to, just any details that you would keep record of as far as like if you're writing the check to the individual. Just keep on a spreadsheet and keep a total. And keep those two definitely separate. So as far as the use of funds for both of the loan programs, when you receive the PPP, of course, at least 60% has to be used for payroll. So just don't use the the same, like if you receive the funds for the PPP and the EIDL, don't use it for payroll for the same time frame. I would suggest maybe using the PPP first. There's no time frame for you to use the EIDL funds for payroll or what other expense you may use it for. But yeah, if you just document as much as you can and keep good records.
And would you recommend 2 separate accounts? I mean, as far as tracking goes for each of the buckets for like an EIDL loan and a PPP loan?
Oh yes, that would be the easiest if they want to open up 2 separate accounts. That would be the best. If not, it would kind of be hard to put them into both a separate account, but I guess whatever they're comfortable doing. But if they're not going to open separate accounts, certainly an Excel spreadsheet, or even I guess if you want to write the items down where you use the funds and the date, and just keep track of what you've spent and what you've spent it on, and payable to whatever company or individual, however you expensed that.
Gotcha. Just really documentation is key. Thank
Right.
you so much, Lisa. And again, Lisa and Marcella, if you could put your contact information in the chat, that would be great as well.
Great.
So Marcella, PPP, what's going on?
I just want to make one other point about the EIDL. The question always comes up, my payment is $2.50 or $50 a month. The whole purpose of the 30-year term is to get that payment really low to help your cash flow, but you do not have to hold that loan out for 30 years. As Lisa pointed out, there's no prepayment penalty. So if you got a $2,500 loan, you could keep it on your books for a year if you like, but you don't have to take 30 years to pay it back. You can pay that back at any time.
And there was just one question of clarification. So the time limit to spend the EIDL funds, it's really been 30 years.
Correct. Whenever you get a loan, it's dispersed all at once. You just have up to 30 years to pay it back on a monthly rate, but you don't have to pay it back over a period of time of 30 years. You can prepay it anytime.
Thank you.
And I just want to add just one more thing. As we talk, we should think of additional comments here, but I've had applicants call that they say, oh, I'm not sure if I want the loan or not. And I always say, well, you don't know what it's going to be like, 12 months from now or 6 months from now. You may need those funds, and you can always prepay without penalty. So I'm not, telling them to keep the funds, and I'm not telling them to pay them back. Just to think about that they may be needing those funds in the future, just to have that in the back of their mind.
Right, and it is a 12-month deferral even before you have to start making payments.
Correct.
So we're
Very nice point. Yeah.
Yeah, not really sure what the future is going to hold. So thank you so much, Marcella.
The latest notices that have come out for the PPP are specifically for lenders on how to process and get their processing fees reported. So if you have lenders on your call, this will be important for them. This procedural notice that came out on July 13th really consolidates all the other information we have. The most important change is that if you have lenders on the call, that notifies the lender that their monthly reporting needs to start on July 15th. So some lenders have said, what if I didn't report on last month's? Well, call me and we'll work it out. But the assumption is that you have reported initially on all disbursements, and now it's time to start reporting monthly basis. And that begins on page 9 of this procedural notice. And we'll talk about it again tomorrow, Thursday, on our 10 o'clock call. And one other question that comes up is what happens when a PPP recipient goes out of business? And unfortunately, We live in a historical time when we're experiencing a large number of businesses. Over 140,000 of them remain closed in the U.S., and 41% have shuttered permanently across the country. So among those with the highest rate of permanent closures are shopping and retail, restaurants, beauty, and fitness. So what happens when a small business recipient closes permanently? Although we are waiting for more guidance and we'll send it out as soon as we get it, we know that if a PPP recipient spend all of the money within either the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks, whichever was appropriate, they will be forgiven. However, if the small business recipient has unused those dollars and cannot pay that off, they may in that subsequent loan, they may need to seek bankruptcy protection. We don't have guidance on that, so as that unfolds, we'll certainly send that out to lenders and borrowers alike. So the SBA still provides guidance on PPA loan forgiveness, but we're waiting for more of that as well. Those are the two hottest things in our world.
So question, and thank you for sharing that. Those are some kind of sobering numbers too. And as we start to get that guidance as far as if a business is going to close down, we'll definitely be sharing that. One question, talking about the 8-week, the original PPP loan, that was an 8-week term, really, when those funds had to be used. And since June, I can't remember the date, I think the 5th, that there was an opportunity to extend that to 24 weeks. We have had a question, some confusion, and perhaps it's a lender confusion or a small business owner confusion, but if they had their PPP loan in that 8-week term and now want to extend it, what should they be doing and what should lenders be providing guidance on? If a lender's saying, well, no, you really don't need to do that. You don't need to extend it. You just need to, keep it as is. What are some of those rules and unique situations that small business owners might face if they're looking at that?
The procedural guidance does allow for any business who has received that PPP loan additional time to spend it out for many reasons. Either they didn't get their business open, they couldn't get all their employees back, they're doing curb service, they didn't get their supply chain in due process. So that 24-week extension is specifically to allow the borrower more time to spend it. That extension needs to be an agreement between the borrower and the lender for just practical reasons. If the lender is pushing back and saying you need to spend it within that period of time, the borrower can always give us a call and we'll discuss it with the lender and see what details the lender is finding difficult. So we can just walk through that with the lender. And usually when the borrower calls, I try to get the lender on the line with the borrower just so all people hear all things at the same time. But yeah, we'll talk through it because specifically the rule allows the borrower additional time or up to 24 weeks to spend that.
So again, if contacting Marcella, and again, we'll put her contact information in the chat and maybe just do a conference call with the lender. And maybe they're not understanding it specifically, or really is a modification like a physical document required to extend that, or is it just an agreement or a note, or is it different for each bank or lender situation?
Each bank has their own process regarding the note. It depends on the bank, the bank note that they've used. If they used a specific date in that note, it may need to be an addendum to the note. The note may need to be modified. So that's something that the lender needs to speak to that because the lender has initiated that document.
Okay, thank you so much, Marcella. Another question is, for a sole proprietor, can you clarify if healthcare and retirement for the sole proprietor can count as the PPP expenses? So
If
in
it's-
reading, there's some information that a sole proprietor can include healthcare premiums and other documents exclude the premiums. If you could clarify that.
The procedural notice is clear that you can, if that's part of your payroll, and with the sole proprietor, then that's a little bit more complicated. Look to your accountant. But if it's on a monthly out-of-pocket expense, the complication comes if your insurance provider wants a one-year premium. You may have to prorate that. You may have to ask your insurance provider to prorate that. But just think of it as a practical matter. During that period of time, what needs to come out of my pocket? And that would be acceptable.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any news on forgiveness date when lenders will be able to submit forgiveness?
The forgiveness, the latest procedural ruling that we just talked about says that deferment ends when forgiveness is given. So if I don't if all of my loan is forgiven, then deferment isn't even relevant. But if I'm not going to have my entire loan forgiven and some of that is going to go into a loan going forward, I might want to keep that deferment as long as I can. So think about, while all borrowers, most of the ones we talk to want to submit that forgiveness app as soon as they possibly can, they want to talk through it with the lender. If it's going to be forgiven, the deferment piece isn't relevant. If it's not all going to be forgiven, they want to discuss that with their lender.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question is, in regards to other SBA loans that business owners may have, and that there has been a deferment for 6 months as far as payment, is this a taxable event, or are they just tacking the interest to the end of the return? I know this is a tax-related question, but wondering if you were familiar with that.
Yeah, we can't speak to the tax piece, but typically how a loan works is if a piece of it is deferred, the interest accrues, but the payment is recast or put onto the end depending on the agreement with the lender.
So it's really specific again to the lender and that original agreement.
Yes, but,
okay.
But any loan that's deferred, typically interest will accrue.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Just again, invite you to ask your specific questions to Lisa and Marcella. You could go ahead and put those in the chat or the Q&A. Marcella, if a business has not applied for a PPP loan and they're trying to figure out whether or not it's right for them, what advice would you give them?
It's right for them if they are in a position where they are not able to open up completely and they still want to keep their employees on. Keep in mind that that period of time when unemployment is available to those employees is soon coming to an end. So if that may impact the business, whether or not they want to continue to keep their employees on, bring them back, that business will have to do the math, do the projection. And I want to, there are resource partners out there such as Michelle and such as SBDC that can help you work through that math as a business and see if that's something that they need to do or would help. It's all about the cash flow. It's all about keeping employees on the payroll. So those are things you want to be talking about either with your resource partner or with your lender.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Another question is, are people applying for emergency loan forgiveness? I'm not sure. Patsy had a question. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
We're not aware of that. We don't have guidance on an emergency loan forgiveness, but what I always say when that question comes up, if you can tell us where you've seen that and point us to your reference, we'll be happy to check it out.
Right. So Patsy, if you have any other information or anything you'd like us to take a look at, go ahead and add that to the Q&A.
There's
Yeah.
lots and lots of stuff out there, and you know, all the news medias are reporting things, and the AICPA is reporting things, and so we're always interested in knowing what you're seeing.
There's a lot of third-party articles out there. Some may be correct and some may be inaccurate. So just keep that in mind when you're looking through those articles on the internet.
That is very true. And, you know, again, with the fraud that is going on, that there's a lot of things out there. A great place to get your information is SBA.gov. So you want to make sure that, you know, or Treasury.gov as well. You want to make sure that the information that you're looking at is from a reputable source. Okay, Patty just noted that she'll look where she found it. So you can let us know, Patsy. Another specific question. I'm a sole proprietor, owner, operator of a truck, and got a PPP loan for a certain amount at the beginning of May. Spent almost all of it on my paycheck, and the balance of a smaller percentage was for fuel for my truck. I have documentation for all this, and of course, fuel costs were over that percentage. But on the 358 EZ, I put the fuel cost. Will all of this loan be forgiven? It kind of goes back to defining what is forgivable for a PPP. Marcella?
Right. The new regulations that came out said that at least 60% has to be spent on payroll, no more than 40% on non-payroll.
Right. So in this situation, if you definitely hit the over 60% on payroll, is there anything unique for a sole proprietor though? Is there any other guidance that you would give for that?
I would definitely document and look to the original application. So I, as a sole proprietor, said, here's what I'm applying for, and here was my 2019 draw or payroll based on how I reported my draw. And above and beyond that, I have some utilities, some fuel, whatever. And that's how I applied. Now I got the loan, and now I want to be forgiven for that. So look to the original application, look to the way you spent it, and look to the way you documented you spent it. If there's some discrepancy, just keep in mind that at least 60% must be spent on payroll to be forgiven.
Thank you, Marcella. And it's just a good reminder for documentation. It's almost like if you receive any loans from the government or any grants from the government, you always just want to make sure that you have documented everything and almost be ready to be asked questions down the road. So just having that ready to go, prepared, you've documented, almost, you know, kind of shared your story to yourself, that if you ever have to share that again, you have that all together.
Right, thank you.
Another question is, if you cannot rehire the same employees because they won't come back, are the business owners able to pay owners the same wages? So basically, are they able to pay themselves the same wages that they would have paid employees that are not coming back? And Tanya, if I'm not describing that right, please let me know.
So I'm guessing the question is, and if I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm guessing the question is, I can't get my employees back and I want to spend all my money, so can I pay myself because I'm working overtime? I would say go to the intent of the program, and that was to keep your employees, or at least the number of employees, or at least 25% of those employees on board. So if I were going to say that, if I were going to document that my employees won't come back, I would then want to document I advertised for the same skills, I advertised for the same number, and I got so many applicants in and so many were qualified, and out of that I was able to do hire some, not hired some. And if that were the case, and I really was up against it and I had to work 24/7, I would surely want to document my time in, time out. I would probably, just because that wasn't the intent of the program, I would probably keep my own time card. I'd punch my own time card. just to be sure, because that it didn't look like you were trying to pad your own payroll, or I was trying to pad my own payroll and didn't really work so hard to get an employee on board.
So in that situation, Marcella, and a business owner approaches their or employee that may be furloughed or not, it's like, we're ready to have you come back. What kind of documentation do they need for that? Do they need like an email? Do they need like an employee to sign anything that says, I don't want my job back? Or what would you recommend for that?
I certainly would. Just like any furlough, I would send out the invitation, time and date, and we love, this is when we need you. Are you willing to come in? I would document the wage I'm offering to pay them, whether or not they get the same benefits or lack of benefits, whether or not they have the same hours or some other hours that may not accommodate them. I would give the same offer that you would make to a new employee at all times. Just be sure that if you were questioned, you would be able to show that you in good faith really did try to keep that employee. We're talking about keeping employees on board, putting money on their kitchen table. And that's the whole intent of the program. So we just want to be sure that we went the extra mile to be sure that all employees in the community had a chance to go back to work.
And then in that situation too, as you mentioned, documenting that you ran an ad or posted something on Facebook or, in one of the groups or wherever it was, and what applicants you received, what their qualifications were. Again, it's just the whole documenting of the potential outreach and recruiting process. And
Right.
then, what that decision was.
Right.
Thank you so much, Marcella. Another question is, given that the PPP loan usage has been extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, is there in any question of the 60% minimum payroll cost fund use requirement that's been met? Can we transfer those? Wait a minute. Okay. Extended to 6, is there a question? Okay. Is there a question on the 60% minimum payroll cost fund requirement has been met? Can we transfer those funds then towards current payroll costs that fall within the 24-month period in order to have the full loan forgiven? And I'm guessing they mean the 24-week period.
Yeah, without getting too deep in the weeds there, I would look to my original application. When I applied, I looked to 2019, and then I said, this was my payroll. So now I got the loan as a result of that, and now I'm being asked to spend that and keep my folks on my payroll. If I need more time to do that, that time is allowed. If I wasn't able to do that, and now I want to, I don't know what that means. You get 24 weeks to spend the same amount of money that you said you needed. So just look at it that way.
And really, whether it's the 8-week time frame or the 24-week time frame, it's still the 60% minimum payroll.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not so much. The math doesn't calculate between 8 and 24 weeks. The math just looks at what I applied for, what I was given for in a loan, and how much time I need to spend it.
Thank you, Marcella. And I hope that answers a question. It was just an anonymous comment. If it doesn't, you can go ahead and ask for some additional clarification.
Yeah.
Another question is, did I understand you correctly that there are no more applications accepted for the PPP? It was only for the EIDL Advance. If so, maybe just to confirm that. Lisa, if you could speak to that too.
PPP processing continues. I believe Lisa's point was that the EIDL Advance portion is not being given out, but the EIDL applications are still being taken.
So
yes,
both
and they're still
applications both applications are still available. It's just that the EIDL Advance is no longer available.
So I hope that answers your question there, Boyce. If not, you can ask for additional clarification. And just one more opportunity to type in any questions or any other additional clarification for Lisa and Marcella. Thank you, ladies, very much for sharing your expertise. We will be doing the same webinar next week at the same time. And we hope that, you know, just to keep you in the loop on what's happening. And your crystal ball, Marcella and Lisa, what do you think's coming up in the next week?
Oh boy.
You know, I gave Lisa a magic ball last week.
I should have brought it in here. Well, I anticipate that the PPP will, I don't know if it'll run out of funds before August 8th. That's the deadline set now. So if you're interested, I'd apply as soon as possible, because just because the expiration date is August 8th doesn't mean the funds will last that long.
That's a good reminder for that date too. So if you have not, if your organization or business has not applied, that is the date that it is expected to end. But again, as Lisa said, we're not sure. It's when
I'd
the
be
funds are
interested,
exhausted.
you have access, we can't see your chat line, but I'd be interested in asking the people on the call, how many of them have money left to not yet spent?
Before that, currently?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually we'll open this up to the floor, and if you could type in the chat, if those of you who have received a PPP and have not yet spent that, that would be just interesting to know if people are willing to share that.
Can you see it now?
Over there on that side.
And then we just had a question, just to clarify, how long do you have to spend the PPP funds? I think that's what we were really talking about, whether it was the 8-week program or the 8-week, or modifying that to the 24-week, Tanya. And that would be something you'd want to talk to your lender about.
Right, the 24-week extension was specifically for those folks who hadn't been able to open, who couldn't open fully, who couldn't get all their employees back out of quarantine, those kinds of circumstances.
So Marcella, if someone was going to apply for a PPP now, would they fall under the 24-week bucket, or would it go back, or would they have to just then determine that with their lender?
They determine that, but to apply now in South Dakota, you want to certify that you are still impacted. And so if a business is still impacted and you're not being able to bring your employees on board, or you are not able to fully open but want to keep your employees paid, that would be a good reason to apply.
Okay, I hope, Tanya, that answers your questions. With the updates on premiums for sole proprietor, then my PPP funds will be spent. I'm not sure, Faye, what that question is. With the updates on premium for sole proprietor, and it sounds like, as Marcella had mentioned before, that your premiums for would apply for PPP funds as long as 60% was dedicated to payroll. I don't know if I'm reading that right, Marcella.
They may, by premium, I'm thinking they're talking about insurance premiums. And I think the best thing to do would be to talk to your insurance provider about prorating that so that you're not paying an upfront fee or an annual fee in one lump sum with these new funds.
Right, with the proration. That's a good point. Another question is, we've spent our PPP entirely on payroll. We are just waiting for our lender to open up their forgiveness applications. So I think that's kind of, that was based on our question of if anyone has, funds still left over. So Sarah, thank you for, and I think we're also waiting for guidance on the specific forgiveness process.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. Oh, and Faye, she was trying to respond to the question if the PPP funds were spent, and she was saying that yes, once she applies her premiums, then they will all be spent. Thank you so much,
I
Faye.
see. Good point.
Yeah, that's great. Another question is, how can lenders be sure that the borrower will be forgiven? Also, how are lenders supposed to document that if the SBA won't accept the forgiveness applications immediately? So specific to lenders.
the borrower submits the forgiveness application to the lender and certifies that the proceeds have been used for the purpose intended. The lender reviews that and makes sure the documentation is in place. If the lender needs additional documentation, they'll ask for it. The lender does have the option to deny it, but of course, then the borrower, if they have some dispute, can go straight to SBA. But I'm guessing, I won't guess. I will guess.
No speculation.
No, I'm not. I don't have my magic ball. So I would suggest that the borrower and the lender get together and discuss that forgiveness app.
Thank you, Marcella. And yeah, I wish we all had the magic ball, right?
Yeah.
The magic 8 ball. So what is the guidance for correct documentation for each type of business? Or is there any?
There is documentation in those procedural notices relative to what you would want to document your application. And unfortunately, many of those applications came in with big round numbers. So in the forgiveness process, I would simply document by the way you spent it. And that could be with checks. If you're a sole proprietor, it's with checks, it's with the Excel spreadsheet. If you are a larger organization, your accountant should be keeping track of that. But document the way you spent the dollars and make sure that those dollars spent on payroll and other payroll expenses equal at least 60% of that dollar amount in your loan.
And then Marcella, you had mentioned that there is a lender roundtable. Are all lenders in South Dakota invited to that, or how do they get on that email if they're not?
If a lender is not on my list, email me and I'll get you on it. Every once in a while, I send out that, and then it comes back undeliverable. Maybe a lender has gone to another lender. So if you're not on the list, please let me know and I'll make sure you get on the distribution list.
And I'm just adding your email here to make sure that people have that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is for lenders and resource partners.
It's not for the public.
Yeah.
Is the normal 7A SBA loan program available right now? If you could talk about that.
Absolutely, and the rates are absolutely wonderful. Now, unfortunately, to get the SBA subsidy, it would have to be closed, the permanent funding would have to be closed in August. So the subsidy portion of it isn't probably going to be available, but new SBA loans going forward still have a wonderful rate. We've got great participating lenders and CDCs in the state. Also the SBA Express for a line of credit. That's a great offering as well as the 7A.
And to find a lender who would provide that, I mean, you could ask your current lender, since most do work with the SBA, but you can also go to sba.gov for a list of lenders, isn't that?
Yes, and as we have a resource guide online, and you can also look up our lenders there.
And there are also some credit unions on the list.
Yeah, so it could be, yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. And another question is, my bank is not ready to accept the PPP loan forgiveness applications yet. Is this typical?
The bank may be advising the borrower that it's not time. Some banks are using third-party processors to do their forgiveness, and those third-party processors are building in electronic format. And because the 24 weeks isn't up, they just may not be ready. Keep in mind that loan continues to be deferred. So if it's not forgiven today, there's no penalty to the borrower.
Yeah, I think just some business owners, like saying, just want to get it done.
I just want to get it done.
I
want to know for sure.
Off my plate.
I want it out of my hair. Yeah, right.
Well, and remember, if it does turn into a loan, it's only at 1% interest rate.
Right. Thanks. And that
it does happen to some of those funds turn into a loan.
Right. Thank you. From the time you submit the forgiveness form, how long will it take until you know the loan has been forgiven?
That's up to the lender processing, and like I said, some lenders have third-party agents doing that, and they're getting ready, they're building an electronic format for that. So your lender in the background is really getting ready for this guidance whenever it comes out so that they can process these in an efficient manner and then get on with our life. But we don't know right now, we can't say for sure how many days it would take to, but the lender will review it and the lender will say, give approval or ask for more information, whatever the lender process is.
So that forgiveness decision resides with the lender.
Yes, based on lender guidelines.
Okay.
So the
from
lender will
SBA.
review it, right? The lender will review it and see, make sure, because the lender is doing these loans with what's called delegated authority. So the lender, it's on the lender to make sure that the documentation is there and the borrower is certified correctly. And it's on the borrower to meet what the borrower is certified to. And then those things come together and the lender says, yes, it looks good, or no, need some more information, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And really the lender is protecting the borrower in that process so that if it does come back in an audit, that borrower is covered. So it's not so much that the lender is pushing back or holding back, but the lender is really doing due diligence to make sure that the borrower is protected, as well as the lender.
It's really a partnership.
Yes,
both ways.
Yep.
Yes. No, thank you. When does the 60-day lender limit start?
Lender limit.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's not quite so relevant. We can get back to, if that's a specific question, email me. But right now the lender is more, the deadlines are from the time the loan is dispersed to the time it can be forgiven to that period of time right now is the focus for the lender.
Okay, so Brianne, if do you have additional questions, I put
Yeah,
Marcella's email
or
address
call,
in there.
and we'll get you an answer. That sounds like it's a very specific question.
Okay, great. Next question is, for self-employed individuals who've received a PPP, is there a best practice to document payments made to self? Is that simply showing rent and utility payments and then dividing the loan amount to cover the 8 weeks?
I would, as a sole proprietor, many of us just write ourselves checks when there is money to write. But when it comes down to filing your taxes, what you show as a draw is really what you should have applied for as your payroll. So what I've recommended to folks is your business is your borrower. So if the business had a separate account and out of the PPP loan account, I wrote a check to my business for payroll and the business paid me, that's really good documentation. If I wrote a check for fuel and the business paid the fuel, I mean, that's just another step, but you may have a much easier way to go about that. But in the memo, you can write in the memo place of your check. There's simpler ways to do that so that when the checks all come out on your bank statement, you see in the memo what it was for. And that's another good way to do it.
So it might be too, is what you're saying is you're writing a check to the business and then from the business you're paying yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that's because the business is the borrower and the borrower is paying you, the sole proprietor, a payroll. So that's really a good way to document.
Yeah, that's a really good example of best practice, especially when you are paying yourself or taking a draw. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? We are just coming up to the top of the hour. A lot of great questions. Again, this session will be recorded, and if anyone would like that, they can respond back and send me an email, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of that or a recording of that. Marcella or Lisa, would you like us to leave? I know you don't have your magic 8 ball, but is there, we have one final question. Is the original part of the forgiveness part of the PPP program now done? I'm guessing that maybe refers to the 8 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. The forgiveness piece is based on the amount you spent. And the amount you spent needs to be at least 60% on payroll. And you're given up to 24 weeks if you need it to spend it. Just be sure you document how you spent it. And if that doesn't answer the question, call or email me and we'll get more specific.
The original application is still out there. It's just the rules have changed a little, somewhat along the road. Does that make sense?
Right, and that's why we're doing these weekly things. And thanks, Lisa, or Lucy, excuse me, for your comment there. So we will go ahead and end. You'll all get an email again once you have attended one of these events. We do send out an email reminder. It's also on our Facebook page, which is SDCEO, so it's South Dakota CEO. And thank you, Marcel and Lisa, for your expertise. We are here to help all of you to work through this and to figure out what's next. So everyone have a great week, and we will see you next week. Thanks.